Today, as we get into things, we're going to look at a lesson that I've been simmering on for some time now, and it's probably been the better part of a year that this one has been simmering. And I'm just curious, any of you have an opinion on meals that are cooked in the slow cooker? Anybody a big fan of like meals that come out of the crock pot? 3 people, 4 people, oh, 5. Yeah, Henry used to, but now he's not. You're straight donuts. Oh, we used to. Okay. I generally consider meals that come out of the crock pot to be pretty good, right? You know, it's like, hey, that's the way it is. And so I hope this lesson comes across to you today as pretty good, but I want you to be forewarned that it's going to be a challenge. It's a challenging lesson that we have today. And so I just need to make sure you're with me on this. Are you ready to be challenged? If you're ready, say, I'm ready. Okay, so you are ready. By show of hands, who here has ever, at least one time in their life, had a good night's sleep? Oh, everybody has had it. Okay. Now, how many of you had that good night's sleep last night? Not. Oh, Scott did. So I was going to say, it doesn't happen all the time, but you know, when you have that good night's sleep, you wake up and you're ready to conquer the world, right? And it's good to be refreshed, is it not? It's really good to be well rested. But I want to just ask you this: what happened before you had a really good sleep? And I'm going to suggest to you that you probably had a very exhausting day. You probably had a big day. There was a lot going on, either physically, emotionally. There was something involved with that. When I used to travel a lot, the first night on the road was typically awful for me. I typically slept for garbage the first night, but then the second night on the road, I would typically sleep a lot better because I was so tired. And over the last few years, one of the major emphases that I've taken in this particular class has been on how do we become better leaders. And after all, if we want to lead people to Christ, we might as well learn the principles and the skills that will allow us to do that effectively and efficiently as we move forward. And the thing is that if it can help there and it can help in other areas of our lives, it's a pretty good thing, is it not? So I began studying leadership about 10 years ago. And one of the things that I would go on to do is that I would find that I would want to attend leadership conferences. As I just shared, I got the Facebook notification that 7 years ago it was actually the day I was taught this lesson, add value to people. That was 7 years ago today. A couple years ago, I was attending the Global Leadership Summit. And they had a speaker who was actually a pastor from Tulsa, Oklahoma. And he had a pretty good lesson. I couldn't tell you what that topic was right now, so I guess maybe it wasn't that good. But it was good enough that I said, I'd be curious to see this guy preach. I'd be curious to see what's going on because I had enjoyed his teaching. And so I started following him and watching the live stream of his teachings. And in one of the first teachings that he did, he said at the end of the sermon that he was going to be taking a sabbatical of about 6 weeks. He was going to take a sabbatical of about 6 weeks. And I don't know about you, but I have never seen that before. Has anybody seen that before? You know, when the idea of sabbatical comes up, this is off my notes. I've only ever, actually that I can remember, encountered that one time in my life, and it was when my dad was teaching 6th grade, and it was when my brother was actually born. It was the fall of 1981. I don't know how, my dad had probably been teaching for 10 or 12 years at that point, and he decided he was going to take a half a year sabbatical in the fall of that year. And what I remember most is we drove to Mississippi to visit his uncle. But I had never seen anybody or heard of anybody taking a sabbatical before. Nobody has heard of a couple of you have? Okay, so it's not It's very uncommon. Is that safe to say? Would we agree that that it's pretty uncommon? So I found it interesting that whenever I find this guy, I'm watching him a week or two, and then I find out he's taking a sabbatical. He says, I'm going to be gone at least 6 weeks. And I thought, well, that's interesting. But when he came back after that 6 weeks, he had a multi-month sermon series on forgiveness. He taught on forgiveness for at least, I think it was at least 12 weeks. I understand that forgiveness is a big topic. I didn't realize it was like 12 weeks big, right? You know, I'm like, the women are nodding that, yeah, that's a big thing. The guys are oblivious, right? We need to be forgiven, don't we, guys? I would continue watching him, and months later he would just go from one series to the next, and months later he would just say that, hey, he was able to stack these all together because he had taken that time away. He had taken that sabbatical, and he was able to put it all together. And I just admired how they were pieced together so well, like a puzzle. Like it came together. They were all connected. And then we got to the following August. And then the following August, he announced that he was taking a sabbatical again. And I was just surprised by it. I'd never witnessed anything like this. And then I began to realize that he does this every year. Every year around the first part of August, he disappears for 6 or 8 weeks, something like that. And and I began to realize that is such an important piece of what he does to allow him to rest and recover and renew and rejuvenate and refocus and do all the planning that's going to come out of it. And I'm going to tell you, it showed. It absolutely showed. Now, whenever I first started down this leadership path, I remember hearing about the first leadership conference that I was going to be able to attend. It was going to be in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And Trace and I went to it. It was the day after the 2016 election. We watched the election results in a hotel room that night. And the next morning we went to a leadership conference. And at that conference, you may have heard of a pastor by the name of Andy Stanley. He was actually there. He was one of the teachers. And he gave this comment, and he may be a little exasperated. He says, I'm pretty sure that Sunday comes twice a week. And I hadn't thought about it before, but I can tell you that after I have heard this, it's so true. It's like every time you turn around, it's Sunday again. It's Sunday again. Every time I turn around, I have to have another lesson ready. You know, it's like I'll get home this afternoon, I'll rest. The next thing I know, it's going to be Saturday afternoon about 3 o'clock, and I'll be like, what's my next lesson? You know, how do I put that together? It's just these things come at us so quick, and it's something like there was a term that was popularized, I think in the 1950s. It was called the rat race. Anybody ever been a part of the rat race? You just like you're on that wheel and you're going and you're going and you're going. Yeah, it's like that's what it is, and it happens with everything. It happens with work. It happens with the extracurricular activities our kids are involved in. We're just always going, and we don't always have the opportunity to sort of step back and take a breath and enjoy what's going on. So I got to thinking, how many of you have a special project for a rainy day? Like, how many of you say, you know what, the next time I have a little bit of time, there's a room that really needs my attention in the house, or maybe it's the basement, or maybe it's the closet, or maybe it's the garage, or if you live on Franklin Pike at our house, it's actually all of those. We have a bedroom that needs attention, we've got a garage that needs attention, we got a basement that needs attention, and there's a closet that I don't even know how to open it, in all honesty. So you know, Taryn's shaking her head here. Actually, we have 2 closets like that, right? It's like we have these challenges. Is that just me? Does anybody else have it like some of you are doing it on the low key? You're like, I'll raise a finger, and hey, that's life, right? That's all. It happens to all of us, right? I don't have the slightest clue when any of those projects are going to be tackled. I know they need to be tackled, but I don't have the slightest clue as to when it could be done, and I don't have the margin to do it right now. I just don't have that bandwidth. We get so wrapped up in our day-to-day that we make very little progress on the things that matter so much to us. Does that resonate with anybody here this morning? Because if that sounds familiar to you too, this morning, this lesson's for you. And if it doesn't sound familiar to you, you might, there might be another class you get more out of today. Again, core value of growth. I want what's best for you. But I want you to know that this doesn't surprise God. God knew that we were going to struggle with this, and He gives us some instructions on this. And He didn't really wait too long in Scripture to begin to give us those instructions. In fact, he modeled it for us beginning in Genesis chapter 2. So if you would, turn with me to Genesis chapter 2. We're going to look at verses 2 and 3. Genesis 2, verses 2 and 3 reads, "By the seventh day God had finished the work He had been doing, so on the seventh day He rested from all His work. Then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it He rested from all the work of creating He had done." God modeled for us a day of rest during vacation, or during vacation. During creation, that's easy for me. I'm thinking about vacation. I was actually thinking about this. You know, when you've gone on vacation, that gives you this finish line, right? Like, how many of you have got more done the week leading up to vacation than like in other weeks put together? Like, you know, it gives you something, right? There's something about it. But God modeled for us that it was appropriate to rest after He had finished creation. And later, He would go on to prescribe rest for us. So if you want to turn with me to the book of Exodus, chapter 20, we're going to look at the section that we call the Ten Commandments, but we're going to look at verses 8, 9, 10, and 11. It reads, "Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, and He rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy." Now, the Sabbath was so important, it actually became a sign of the covenant. Now, for those of you that have studied, how many of you have studied covenant with me before? Quite a few of you have. But one of those things that we look at was the covenant sign, that there was some sign that you had that showed that you were in covenant. And in the modern day, you know, the modern covenants that we have, we typically think of marriage. And what's the sign that you're married? You have a wedding ring. Right? It's like, hey, this is the sign that... And so God says, this is going to be your sign that you're in covenant with me. Turn ahead to Exodus 31, verses 15, 16, and 17. It says, "For 6 days work is to be done, but the seventh day is a day of Sabbath rest, holy to the Lord. It will be a sign between me and the Israelites forever." So that the way that the Israelites showed that they were in a covenant relationship with God was that they would rest. They would rest. Now, when Jesus got here, He would often take things and he would sort of twist them, and I shouldn't say twist. He would take a different angle on it, right? He would look at it and take a different perspective, and a lot of times it would catch people off guard. It would be such a different perspective. So Jesus did some teaching in the Gospel of Mark. If you'll turn with me to Mark chapter 2. We're going to look at verse 27. Maybe we'll look at verse 27 if I can find it. Jesus is telling the people, He says, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. I want you to think about that for, where'd my eraser go? Am I looking right at my eraser? There's my eraser. Look at that. So you have some relationship between God, between man, and between Sabbath. Right? And what could be easy, and maybe I'm doing this backwards. God creates the Sabbath, and we have man. And so the idea is, well, does man serve the Sabbath and that honors God? But Jesus tells us, no, it's a little bit different than that. He said, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So that puts man here, and the Sabbath, hopefully this makes some sense. The Sabbath supports man so that man can honor God. Does that make a little bit of sense to you? This is what happens whenever I draw things extemporaneously. And don't ask me to spell that. I don't know how to spell that. That may not even be a real word, Corinne. You can double check me. But it was, is it a real word?
No comment.
Okay, I don't know.
Of course it is. You said it.
The Sabbath is a gift or a tool that is to be used by man, right? Man is not to be a tool for the Sabbath. And, you know, there were a lot of people that would get so worked up about that. Like Jesus would have conflict with the Pharisees over that. Oh, you're doing this on the Sabbath. You did this, you know, you walked on the Sabbath. There were these different challenges. So while the Sabbath was prescribed to the Israelites under the law of Moses, the writer of Hebrews tells us that we should observe a Sabbath and rest just as God modeled for us. And if you'll turn with me to Hebrews chapter 4, verses 9 and 10, it reads, "There remains then a Sabbath rest for the people of God. For anyone who enters God's rest also rests from their works, just as God did from his." Now, we have this thing that God modeled resting for us because he wants us to rest. And, you know, this is something that is probably counterintuitive to much of the world. You know, there's a lot of folks that just, you know, go, 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 go. You know, wouldn't you expect that you would be able to get more accomplished in 7 days than 6? Doesn't that stand to reason that, well, hey, if you went 7 days, you would get more done than if you did 6, right? And we can even put a spiritual spin on this. Wouldn't you be able to share the good news of Jesus with more people in 7 days than you would with 6? And I think it seems like that should make sense. But I came across a couple of experiments that I want to share with you today. One was on marksmanship. There were people taking target practice with firearms. And there were 2 groups. And try to draw this out. So so target practice. You had group 1 and group 2. Now, group 1, let me make sure I tell this the right way. They had unlimited practice. They could go, and they could practice whenever they want, however much they wanted. Just go practice, practice, practice. Don't you think that the more practice you have, the better off you would be? Right? That stands to reason, right? The other group had a restricted time. They had limited time to practice. So one is unlimited, one is limited. And what they found was that the groups with limited practice time often did just as well or even better than those with unlimited practice time. And what that does is it suggests that the rest or stepping back allows for mental and physical recovery. Now, I found this study. This is a study from 1967. This is on free throw shooting in basketball. I wish I would have known this 30-some years ago. There are actually 3 groups in this. And in the first group, let me get it right, they had physical practice 20 minutes a day. The second group, no practice. And the third group, group 3, they did mental practice. They imagined shooting a free throw for, I presume it's 20 minutes a day. After 20 days of doing this, 20 days later, this is what we found. The group that did physical practice for 20 minutes a day, they were plus 24%. They got better, right? Group 3, this was no change. Group 3, how much do you think that the mental did? Anyone want to take a guess? 50? Jamie, did you have one? 50? Okay. So it was about 23. 23% better. So so there's something about the rest. There's something that has there. There's something about taking the physical rest that allows things to grow and improve and get better. Now, it's been a while. I have to look back, but I'm reasonably sure that I've taught on this principle before. But it's the law of reflection. We probably did this, I'm going to imagine we did it back in January, maybe. But this law states, or maybe it's been a couple years ago, but this law states that you have to pause to allow growth to catch up. If you keep going and going and going and going and going and going, you're learning things, but you're not taking time to hold on to them. Right? That's the principle. And what I've come to realize is that growth happens when we rest. Growth happens when we rest. We are built back up when we rest. And God knows this, and so He instructs us to do it regularly. He instructs us to do it on the Sabbath. But I want you to also know this. In this book, God doesn't stop at a day. He doesn't just stop with the Sabbath. He actually goes and He would prescribe sabbatical years. He would say, hey, you need to take these extended times off. And He would even do something called the year of Jubilee. Anybody studied the year of Jubilee? A couple of you have? Yeah, I mean, you maybe have heard of it. But we can find this in the book of Leviticus. If you'll turn with me to Leviticus chapter 25, we're going to look at a couple handfuls of verses here. The entire chapter is going to be good, and I'll encourage you to check that out on your own. We just don't have the luxury of time here this morning to look at it. But we're going to read verses 1 through 7, then we're going to skip ahead and do 10, 11, and 12. You can read the full chapter later if you're so interested. But it reads, "The Lord said to Moses at Mount Sinai, 'Speak to the Israelites and say to them, when you enter the land I'm going to give you, the land itself must observe a Sabbath to the Lord.'" Now just pause. The land has to observe a Sabbath. "For 6 years sow your fields, and for 6 years prune your vineyards and gather their crops. But in the 7th year, the land is to have a year of Sabbath rest, a Sabbath to the Lord. Do not sow your fields or prune your vineyards. Do not reap what grows of itself or harvest the grapes of your untended vines. The land is to have a year of rest. Whatever the land yields during the Sabbath year will be food for you, for yourself, your male and female servants, and the hired worker and the temporary residents who live among you, as well as for your livestock and the wild animals in your land. Whatever the land produces may be eaten." Jumping ahead to verse 10. Consecrate the 50th year and proclaim liberty throughout the land to all its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee for you. Each of you is to return to your family property and to your own clan. The 50th year shall be a jubilee for you. Do not sow and do not reap what grows of itself, or harvest the untended vines, for it is a jubilee and is to be holy for you. Eat only what is taken directly from the fields. And so what we have here is God is prescribing before the Israelites enter the promised land. He's talking about this idea of what we'll call a sabbatical, not a Sabbath, but a longer, a sabbatical. And he's prescribing it for the ground. He says the land needs to do it once every 7 years. So it's every, I can't even spell every. Every 7 years. And if we do this 7 times, that gets us to 49 years. And then in the 50th year, it's Jubilee. All right? So like most people would experience 1, maybe 2 years of Jubilee in their lifetime, right? They would have the opportunity to see this. But I want you to think about this. I want you to think about what would happen if there was a year, especially in an agricultural community like this, where they had to give the land the time off. What would that be like? And I'm going to suggest to you, I've got 5 things. I got 5 things here that I'll give you that what would a sabbatical do? Sabbatical. Number 1. The number 1 thing that I think the sabbatical would do is it would give people a time of rest. We give the ground the rest, but you know what? The people don't have to work the ground, so you know what the people now have? The people themselves now have rest. It would give people rest. And it would also then, if they had that time to rest, it would make sense that it would also give people time to reflect. They could look out and they would say, normally, so Trace will probably be the only one that appreciates this humor, but my old man is consumed with time changes. When the time changes in the spring or when it changes in the fall, we will go days, if not weeks, with my old man saying, really, it's whatever the old time was, right? Like that's what it was, right? And I can only imagine what my old man would be like in a Sabbath year. He would say, well, Jess, normally this time we would be baling hay in this field, or we'd be planting corn in this field, or there would be some reflection. Normally this time of year, this is what we would be doing. There would be this time of reflection. Number 3, it will give the people time for reward and repair. It would give people time to fix up that closet, or that spare bedroom, or the garage, or the basement, or maybe all of them, if that's the point they find themselves in life, right? There would be the time that if you're not doing this other thing, what can you do? You'll be doing things that will prepare you for where you go from there. What these sabbatical years would do is they would also prioritize relationships. Now, we didn't read this today. But it would talk about how you should be engaging other people that you may have debts with. It would talk about that. And there would be very much this emphasis on people. Right? We've talked about that as a core value here before, have we not? And what it would also do is it would give people time to refocus. So when they would have this year, when they didn't have these other things going on, it would allow them to do, and this is, I'm sure this isn't an exhaustive list. You could probably come up with a dozen other things that would go on it. But as far as big bucket type things, I think that gives us some ideas of what people would do in those sabbatical years when the ground was resting. And if you think about it, there's a number, this is what would happen, but there's a number of benefits that people would be able to experience from that. So I'm going to try to move this over here. Well, what are some then benefits that people would have? I think most of them you'll see with physical and spiritual renewal, but when you have that, it can prevent burnout. It would keep you mentally sharp. It would give you the opportunity to strengthen your connection to God. Right? If you're not sowing and reaping this year, if you're only taking what the ground's going to produce, sort of naturally there you're going to be relying on God in a little different way than when you're actively working it, right? I'm going to suggest this. You may also get some fresh ideas, right? You may say, hey, there's something different we can do here. And you may get clarity of vision. And I think those would be some benefits. Like anybody interested in preventing burnout, improving your mental sharpness, strengthening your connection with God? Anybody open to a fresh idea? What about getting clarity? I think those are all things that we would welcome. And it's so hard to do when you're wrapped up in a rat race, is it not? It's so hard to do. And this is where I find the challenge. If there's so many benefits, if there's so many good things that we can find from taking a Sabbath or a sabbatical, why don't we do it? Why don't we do it? Last week, I was not feeling well. A matter of fact, I was an absolute, I think the technical term was mess. I was an absolute mess last week. And so what I did, somewhat grudgingly, is I took the week off and I sat in the back corner of the room, and I can't tell you how many times I walked out. I had to walk out, had to walk out, had to walk out. Excuse me. But you know what I did is I sat in the back corner of the room last week? I learned. I was thankful that I had lessons that we had recorded that we could play. And we put one up and we played. And for those of you that were here last week, maybe you found it as painful as I did that the first 6 or 8 minutes of last week's lesson that I played was completely irrelevant. It was announcements for stuff that had gone on a year before. And so before we started today, Michelle was saying, hey, don't you want to start your video? And the answer is, yeah, I do. But I don't want to record stuff that I'm going to bore people with. I don't want to do that. Imagine this. You open it up and it's like, hey, this is what's happening in June of 2014. You're not going to care. And if you drone on for 6 or 8 minutes doing it, you're inviting people to not participate. And so I actually got a little bit better last week because I wasn't feeling good, and I sat in the back and I rested, but I learned and I got a little bit of clarity. So I'm trying something different. This may be as big or more of a disaster than what I had before. It's possible. It's possible. I'd like to think it's going to be just a little bit better, but that's where we are. So as I've been considering this lesson, as I've shared with you before for the better part of a year, several thoughts have been floating around in my head, and this is what's come back to me in the last week. I realized for about the better part of 14 years, and it may be more than that now, I've lost track, I've been teaching a class. I've been teaching a class. And the number of Sundays that I have taken off have been reasonably few. There'll be times when we don't have class because it's a holiday weekend, right? There was a time when we wouldn't have class if we were doing a missions breakfast or a youth breakfast or whatever. There would be some times, but if we were to count up the number of Sundays that I taught over the course of a year, I would hazard a guess it would be in the mid to high 40s per year. That's just a ballpark number. And today, I stand here before you, and I don't know if that was the right thing to do. I don't. I don't know if it was right for me to teach every Sunday that I could. Now, I fell into this trap of thinking, well, if I'm there, I might as well teach, right? That's what I did. But today, I'm challenged with the thought of maybe I could better serve God, maybe I could better serve you, maybe I could better serve myself, maybe I could better serve my household by taking a rest. And maybe that applies to you in your individual situations as well, right? Maybe you're serving in some capacity, and this morning, as odd as the thought may be, I would ask that you consider that serving every Sunday may not be the best thing for you or the church. I told you this was going to be an awkward lesson. This may make you uncomfortable, because I know it makes me uncomfortable to bring it up. But I want you to consider what can happen when you take time off. This I'm going to put under the topic of even more benefit. Number one, will empower others. If I was to take rest, what that's going to do, it's going to allow others to step in and fill this place, right? It's going to give the opportunity for people to step into leadership roles. It's going to give the opportunity for people to develop their own gifts. It's going to give people the opportunity to be a growing part of the church. And when we do this, when we take that time, when we step away, we empower the team, the larger team, to grow and to thrive and to get better. So, one of the things that can happen by stepping back is we can empower others. And when we do that, the byproduct of that is that we can strengthen the church. When we empower others, we create a stronger, more capable leadership team within the church. When a Sunday school teacher steps back, what that gives us the opportunity for is for a stronger, broader base of teachers to develop. Right? That's what can happen. And when we do that, it's going to give more people the opportunity to contribute to the church's growth. And it's going to bring more skill sets. It's going to bring more perspectives. It's going to bring more experiences. It's going to bring all those things that can lead to a better overall experience. And so I stand before you this morning, and I think one of the healthiest things we can do as a church is not just to observe the Sabbath, but to also take sabbaticals. Getting a lot of stone faces this morning. All right, so maybe I won't. It's a good thing we're off next week, I guess, right? But I also need to acknowledge this. There's an awful lie that the enemy is going to put forth. Maybe you've heard it before, right? The enemy is going to look at this, and he's going to say something to you like, if you step away for a week, or 2 weeks, or 3 weeks, or whatever, everything will fall apart. Have you heard that one before? Maybe it wasn't at church, maybe it was at work. If I don't do it, it ain't going to get done. If I don't, how many of us, and we should all raise our hands for this. I'm reasonably sure. Well, maybe Scott won't. But I think most of us will raise our hands that if there's something that we don't do, somehow us not doing that could possibly force the earth to spin off its axis and everything would have you been there? We find ourselves in some high gravity situations. Oh my goodness, if I don't do this, right? There's these challenges. If you don't show up, everything could fall apart. And you know what? The enemy's right. If you don't show up, everything. But I want you to think about it. Everything could. It's not everything must fall apart. There's a huge difference. There's a huge difference. If we showed up on a Sunday morning and there was no worship service, if there was no sermon, if there was no Bible class, how many times would you come back? And the answer is probably not very many. You'd be like, I guess they don't do that stuff here. Right? Everything could fall apart. So what we need to do is we need to have a different strategy. We need to have a different strategy. And this is why we've studied biblical leadership in this class for the last 4 years. For the last 4 years, this is what we've been looking at. We need to lead people to cover for us. Do not fall for the trap that I'm the only one that can do this. We have several hundred people in this building. There's somebody who can do something marginally competent to, or marginally similar to what you can do. Some of you can do it marginally better than what the people are doing it. And that probably starts right here. There's some people in here that I know that are just fantastic teachers that would teach much better than I. I know that, right? We need to lead people to cover for us. And when we do that, when we lead people to cover for us, we build not just other people up, but we give ourselves the margin that we build ourselves up. Think about that. This is what I know. There are far too many lost people out there in the world. There's far too many lost people, once you get on Route 285 or once you get on Adams Street or Franklin Street or wherever. There's too many lost people too close to us right now. That's one thing that I know. The other thing I know is this. You and I, we were made to make a difference. Now, I don't know if you think about that, how often you think about that, but I want you to think about it. You were made to make a difference. When God built you, He's like, yep, this is what the world needs. Go make a difference. Go make a difference, right? Now, if we are to make a difference, it's going to go beyond inviting someone on a Sunday morning. That's a wonderful first step. But now we have a bunch of people we're inviting in, And now we have this capacity and we need to be able to serve those people. We need to be developing our skills. We need to be expanding those folks who are serving on a Sunday morning. And we need to allow ourselves to get better at serving at the same time. We can invite people on a Sunday morning, but if they're going to come back, we all need to grow and strengthen and improve. And if we're not improving, I don't know that we can have a high expectation of people coming back. I don't know that. We have to learn and grow and use that in service to building God's kingdom. Now, I know there's at least another lesson that we obviously don't have time to go through this morning on how to rest. I don't have that answer this morning. I know some of you are saying, Jess, I buy it. I get I should rest. I don't know how to rest. I don't know that I know how to either. That's an adventure we can look at some other time. But I do know this. I know we need rest. I know we all need rests. And I know when we bring people along and develop them so that, that's what we need to do. We need to bring people along beside us. We need to help them. We need to develop them so that we can have rest and we can help grow the kingdom. And so I wanted to share with you my personal goal. As I've thought about this, I said, well, lead the way here, hotshot, right? If you know you need rest, how are you going to do it? How are you going to do it? And this is what I've come to realize. I've come to realize that I need to find 3 to 5 people who would be willing to teach a lesson maybe 3 to 5 times a year. Now, I don't know exactly how the math works out, just that's ballpark numbers. But my goal was to identify 3 to 5 people who'd be willing to teach 3 to 5 lessons a year for me. And I think if you look back, you would say, you know what, we've had some decent experiences. Stan has been here, Sean has been here, Bob has been here, Trace has taught a lesson. And if we think about it, they were probably all better lessons than what I've done. I mean, because they were highly relevant, passionate topics to the people doing those lessons. You got a lot out of those lessons, I think. I know I got a lot out of those lessons. But as I list off those lists of names, not that I'm opposed to them, they could teach next week. They could teach the next 3 months. But as I share that with you, they also have other responsibilities within the church. It's not about piling more on them, but there's an invitation for each of us. And maybe you have one. Maybe you just have one lesson. Maybe there's something that really resonates with you. I know that's where I started. The lesson I started teaching was covenant. That was a long time ago. That's where I started. But my intent, my goal is to develop a team of people to help teach this class. And I just want you to know that invitation is extended to each of you this morning. If you would like to learn and grow and get better and teach 1 or 2 or whoever, who knows whatever, I would love to work with you to help you develop those skills. And they're skills that will help you wherever, not just here, it'll help you wherever you are. They're good skills to develop. But by doing that, it will allow rest to happen, and it will strengthen the ministries that we have in this church. And somebody may say, you know what, I'll do that and I'll teach a couple of weeks, and then they'll say, you know what, I think I should have my own small group. I think I should be doing this. I think I should be doing that. And that's sort of the natural progression of how these things go. So if any of you, if that has sparked any level of interest with you, please let me know. I would love to work with you. I would like to help train and equip you to do that. We're way out of time. But I will tell you this, there's a lot of people who will say, I don't know that I have the time. And you won't. You'll never have the time. But this is the last note. I didn't really know how to work this in, but I just left this on my outline. And it's this: good pushes out bad. Good pushes out bad. When you fill those things up, that will take the good stuff, will push the bad stuff in your life out of there. That's what it'll do. So you want to load up the good stuff. So with that, I'll wrap up by putting the 3 letters on the board that we typically do, ACT, based on what we've learned this morning. What action will you take? What change will you make? And is there something that you learn that you can teach to somebody else for your sake and theirs?